On the line with us is veteran American war correspondent Phil Ittner. He is in Kyiv, Ukraine. Phil Ittner, PhilippIttner is his Twitter handle if you want to correspond with him. And in fact, that's how we hooked up with Phil first, was on Twitter. And Phil, hey, welcome back to the program. Give us an update. What's going on there?
Boy, Tom, that's a pretty big umbrella there. Lots of things has been happening here. Of course, in my mind, the big thing was what happened on Monday, which was the expected missile and the Ukrainian strike to Russia to have Russia's military on its back foot, which we'd all kind of been anticipating. And then when the attacks eventually did happen, there were missiles that were shot down because the Ukrainian air defense was able to protect the country. So Monday was a big day. Today, of course, it's advantageous. So I guess we're speaking because, of course, we have Brittany Griner being released. It's not specifically Ukrainian news. But anything that kind of affects the Russian sphere we're talking about. I was a CBS radio correspondent in Moscow in the 90s, and I very clearly remember the pursuit for the boot, the arms dealer that Griner paid for. So I have some insight there. But we continue to suffer through a harsh winter. Colder. Today, in the last day or two, there was kind of a fog blanket that didn't keep the temperature from dropping too low to below freezing. But it is winter is here, and it is setting in.
We're talking with veteran war correspondent Phil Ittner in Kyiv, Ukraine, and Phil, what is the situation with getting things repaired there? I wrote an op-ed piece yesterday arguing that we need another Berlin airlift, that America and allied countries need to start airdropping. I don't know how many of the trains in Ukraine are electric, but when you got no electricity, you got nothing. That we need to start dropping generators and fuel and all kinds of stuff into Ukraine. What is the situation with recovering electricity on the backside of these Russian attacks?
Well, I think that there's a lot that's happening in relation to protecting the electrical grid, and I think that preemptive strike that happened on Monday was in no short order part of trying to protect the electrical grid, because by striking at the bombers that were on the airfields inside Russia, they were then unable to come and take part in this wave of attacks that were clearly targeted at the electrical grid. So the Ukrainians are being as proactive in trying to protect their infrastructure as they are, preparing for when the grid is actually armed. Make no Ukrainians know that the target number one for the Russians is the electrical grid and the infrastructure here. So they are putting everything in order to as soon as something gets hit, to try and get it back online as quickly as possible. But Tom, I think you're absolutely correct. I think that there needs to be a really hard press to try and provide alternatives for Ukrainians, whether that's generators or these large cells that can be put on the back of trucks and brought in. It's interesting you mentioned the railway system. Yes, a huge percentage of the railway system is electric here, but they're already preparing to, if they have to, bring out old different styles of railway system that can I've even heard stories of them retrofitting steam engines to put on the railway system if that's necessary to do. The Ukrainians are not sitting idly by and contact the grid. They are making preparations to do alternatives or to quickly restore whatever gets damaged.
Now,
having said that, obviously everybody is taking their own personal responsibility. I have a supply of water. I have a supply of warm clothing, things that if it really gets bad, I can even burn a little wood Bunsen stove, basically. And we don't use electricity if we don't have to keep scrap. But walking down the streets of Kyiv today, you will hear every a generator going because that's how we live. So international aid in people alive and sustaining them through this winter is going to be essential. But Ukrainians themselves have agency, and they are doing everything that they possibly can to prepare and make it through this winter. Because while they're tired, while nobody loves the environment, everybody does accept that the Russians is an unacceptable alternative.
Yeah, I totally get it. Phil, your phone is just breaking up really badly, and it's got to be a real challenge to our listeners right now. So, hopefully next week, by the time that comes around, we can get the audio working better. One last question for you, though. What's the United States has been very reluctant, and Western allies as well, to provide Ukraine with any long-range weaponry that could reach into Russia, on the fear that they might use it. Now Ukraine has used old Soviet weaponry to reach into Russia and attack, as you mentioned, that airbase where the bombers were coming out of to fire the missiles that were taking out the electrical grid. What's your sense of how this might escalate? That Ukraine is going to. I mean, was that kind of a one-off? Was that, a last-ditch desperate effort? Or does Ukraine have the ability, to the best of your knowledge, to increasingly reach into Russia and punish them for their attacks on Ukraine?
Tom, I don't think we'll see an increase, but I do think that we will see a sustained effort for the Ukrainians to make the Russians feel that they are engaged in military contact with Ukrainians, whether it is the naval ones that hit in Sevastopol a few weeks ago, maybe now 6 weeks ago, or whether it's the most recent attacks by these drones that hit the airfields. I do not see a massive onslaught of ammunition.
Yeah. The Russians have to get this sense that
continually sending stuff.
Yeah, that the war
will make the Russians feel it.
That the war is coming home. Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent in Kyiv, Ukraine, and broadcasting live from Kyiv, Ukraine, an American war correspondent. Phil, thanks so much for the yeoman's work you're doing.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you.
We'll get those bugs worked out. We'll get it better next week.
We will. We definitely will. Thank you very much. Phil Ittner. You can find him on Twitter at PHILIPITTNER. We'll be right back.